evening and welcome to Bookmark, another time to review or to suggest books that you may care to read. And tonight I'm going to take three poetry books which I use on a regular basis. The first of them is called Lifelines, New and Collected. This is an anthology of three other collections, and there's a lovely story behind it. I managed to pick this up at a very knockdown price in Eason's years ago, but Eason's, I'm afraid, has now met its demise. But there was a school teacher in Dublin who had the idea of trying to inculcate a sense of love of poetry amongst his English literature students. And they were up for it, but they also decided to combine it by writing to famous people worldwide, Ireland, but also worldwide, and asked them to suggest a favourite poem or a piece of literature, but mainly poetry, and then suggest the reason why. And they also twinned that with raising money for charity work overseas, especially in third world or underdeveloped countries. It became a huge success. It managed to raise a lot of money, praised profile for charities, but also as a kind of literary venture was a remarkable success. And people were very willing to join the venture. And this is... This is a not so much a poem, but actually this is from a journalist, Frank MacDonald, who actually quotes from Chief Seattle of the Duwamish tribe in Washington State, who was asked by the US president of the time, Franklin Pierce, in 1854 to consider allowing the American government of the day to buy over the land and put the Indians on reservation, the Native Americans on a reservation. And we all know how that has turned out to their detriment. The Native Americans have suffered terribly. But here is a quote from a long letter from Chief Seattle, 1786 to 1866. And this is a prose piece, but it's got such a poetic gift and such a beautiful way of understanding life and the spirituality and ethos of native peoples that puts the white man or the white person to shame. And given our ecological consciousness of the last few years, we have so much to learn from others who have been caring for the earth far better than us and way before us. So this is worth hearing. It comes under several headings. The first one is "The Earth is Sacred." Chief Seattle writes, "How can you buy or sell the sky, the warmth of the land? The idea is strange to us. If we do not own the freshness of the air and the sparkle of the water, how can you buy them? Every part of this earth is sacred to my people. Every shining pine needle, every sandy shore, every mist in the dark woods, every clearing and humming insect is holy in the memory and experience of my people. The sap which courses through the trees carries the memories of the red man. The white man's dead forget the country of their birth when they go to walk among the stars. Our dead never forget this beautiful earth, for it is the mother of the red man. We are part of the earth, and it is part of us. The perfumed flowers are our sisters. The deer, the horse, the great eagle, these are our brothers. The rocky crests, the juices in the meadows, the body heat of the pony and man, all belong to the same family. So when the great chief in Washington, that's the US president, sends word that he wishes to buy our land, he asks much of us. The great chief sends word he will reserve us a place so that we can live comfortable among our own people. He will be our father and we will be his children. So we will consider your offer to buy our land, but it will not be easy, for this land is sacred to us. The shining water that moves in the streams and rivers is not just water, but the blood of our ancestors. If we sell you the land, you must remember that it is sacred, and you must teach your children that each ghostly reflection in the clear water of the lakes tells of events and memories in the life of my people. The water's murmur is the voice of the Father's Father. Then the next heading, kindness to the rivers. The rivers are our brothers, they quench our thirst. The rivers carry our canoes and feed our children. If we sell you our land, you must remember and teach your children that the rivers are our brothers and yours, and you must henceforth give the rivers the kindness you would give a brother. We know that the white man does not understand our ways. One portion of land is the same to him as the next, for he is a stranger who comes in the night and takes from the land whatever he needs. The earth is not his brother, but his enemy. When he has conquered it, he moves on. He leaves his father's graves behind, and he does not care. He kidnaps the earth from his children, and he does not care. His father's graves and his children's birthright are forgotten. He treats his mother the earth and his brother the sky as things to be bought, plundered, sold like sheep or bright beads. His appetite will devour the earth and leave behind only a desert. I do not know. Our ways are different from yours. The sight of your cities pains the eyes of the red man, but perhaps it is because the red man is a savage and does not understand. There is no quiet in the place in the white man's cities, no place to hear the unfurling of leaves in spring or the rustle of the insect's wings. The clatter only seems to insult the ears. And what is there to life if a man cannot hear the lonely cry of the whippoorwill, and I don't know what that is, or the argument of the frogs around a pond at night? The Indian prefers the soft sound of the wind darting over the face of a pond, and the smell of wind itself, cleansed by the midday rain, or scented with the pine and pine. The air is precious to the red man, for all things share the same breath, the beast, the tree, and the human. The white man does not seem to notice the air he breathes. Like a man dying for many days, he is numb to the stench. But if we sell you our land, you must remember that the air is precious to us, that the air shares its spirit with all the life it supports. The wind that gave our grandfather his first breath also receives his last sigh. And if we sell our land, you must keep it apart and sacred, as a place where even the white man can go to taste the wind that is sweetened by the meadow's flowers. And in the final section, all things are connected. So we will consider your offer to buy our land. If we decide to accept, I will make one condition. The white man must treat the beasts of this land as his brothers. I have seen 1,000 rotting buffaloes on the prairie, left by the white man who shot them from a passing train. I am a savage, and I do not understand how the smoking iron horse, the train, can be more important than the buffalo that we kill only to stay alive. What is man without the beasts? If all the beasts were gone, man would die from great loneliness of spirit. For whatever happens to the beast also happens to man. All things are connected. Whatever befalls the earth befalls the sons of earth. The white man too shall pass, perhaps sooner than other tribes. Continue to contaminate your bed, and you will one night suffocate in your own waste. When the buffalo are all slaughtered, the wild horses all tamed, the secret corners of the forest heavy with scent of many men, and the view of ripe hills blotted by talking wires, where is the thicket? Gone. Where is the eagle? Gone. And what is it to say goodbye to the swift pony and the hunt? It is the end of living and the beginning of survival. Chief Seattle quoted as one of the entries in this wonderful book. It's mainly poems, but sometimes you get fragments and segments of prose. But the poetic nature of that prose from an Indian chief who ironically calls himself a savage, it's deep with irony, because it's actually the white people and their rapacious ways that are probably more savage than those so-called savages who have been so oppressed in the course of the last couple of 100 years. The second book is a poem, The Poem for the Day, Volume 1. There are 2 volumes with a foreword by Wendy Cope. This is the first of 2 volumes, and it literally does give a poem a day. And I'm going to read from March 27 because it's one of my favourite poems, and it's one that I committed to memory years ago. A love of William Wordsworth was instilled in me by A Choice of Poets, the poetry book we use for O-levels. And Wordsworth, from a different era, obviously, but there's something about Wordsworth poetry that just still resides within me and others. This is called it's an ode, Intimations of Immortality from Recollections of Early Childhood. I could say this without looking at the book, but I will read just in case I foul up. This is the first part of a long poem. He says, there was a time when meadow, grove and stream, the earth and every common sight, to me did seem apparelled in celestial light, the glory and the freshness of a dream. It is not now as it hath been of yore, turn wheresoe'er I may, by night or day, the things which I have seen I now can see no more. The rainbow comes and goes, and lovely is the rose. The moon doth with delight look round her when the heavens are bare. Waters on a starry night are beautiful and fair. The sunshine is a glorious birth. But yet I know where'er I go, that there hath passed away a glory from the earth. Something of that deep abiding love, glorying in life in all its innocence when you're young, before all the experiences that kind of crowd in and begin to make you weary and maybe make you cynical because of all the hurts and the disillusionment of life. Wordsworth is going back to revisit that ancient sort of primordial glory that we all have, and that he is convinced we will inhabit once again when we, in a sense, go beyond earth to heaven or eternity. So there's something beautiful about that. And there's a lovely quote here. Each of the poems has got a little narrative, something about the poet or the poem, but also some quotes and some significant events on each day. March 27, this is what Wordsworth's sister wrote. In her Grasmere journal for March 27th, 1802, Wordsworth's sister Dorothy wrote, quote, a divine morning. At breakfast, William wrote part of the ode above. Mr. Olive sent the dung, and William went to work in the garden. We sat all day in the orchard. So you've got sublime poetry, a beautiful setting, brother and sister who are, great artistic poets, nature lovers and writers of poetry, and Mr. Olive came and supplied dung, and the dung made the orchard a bit more fruitful. So you've got this lovely juxtaposition of the sublime and the slimy, so to speak. So Intimations of Immortality, William Wordsworth, and that was just the first stanza, and that's the book, Poem for the Day, Volume 1, Wendy Cope. Just to quote a wee bit more of that, there are lovely lines later on that I commit to memory. Hence, in a season of calm weather, though inland far we be, our souls have sight of that immortal sea, can see the children sport upon the shore, and hear the mighty waters rolling evermore. Anytime you're near the seaside, or even away from the seaside inland, Wordsworth is convinced that those memories from childhood still reside in the inner eye and the inner ear and the inner heart. And then that poem ends with wonderful lines again. He says, thanks to the human heart by which we live, thanks to its tenderness, its joys, its fears, to me the meanest flower that blows can give. And then the lovely line at the end, thoughts that do often lie too deep for tears. Wordsworth had a real feel for the human heart and the human condition. And then the other one is Poem for the Day, Volume 2. This time it's with a foreword by Andrew Motion. And again, you've got 365 days. There's an entry for every day. This one is by Wendy Cope. I'm quoting from the 21st of July. I read these two books most days. If I try to remember, I'll read the appropriate reading or poem for each day. So it kind of gives a nice sort of bookend to each day, poetry beginning and ending. This is Wendy Cope and a poem called Being Boring. And I love this because it's so matter of fact and tongue in cheek. Poets and other people try to reach for the kind of the big experiences of life, but poets actually pay attention to the small, ordinary details, and you can't get more ordinary than this. She deliberately sets out to write a poem called Being Boring, and then the subtitle is May You Live in Interesting Times, a Chinese Curse. So countercultural and counter-excitement, she says this. If you ask me what's new, I have nothing to say, except that the garden is growing. I had a slight cold, but it's better today. I'm content with the way things are going. Yes, he is the same as he usually is, still eating and sleeping and snoring. I get on with my work. He gets on with his. I know this is all very boring. There was drama enough in my turbulent past, tears and passion. I've used up a tankful. No news is good news, on long may it last. If nothing much happens, I'm thankful. A happier cabbage you never did see. My vegetable spirits are soaring. If you're after excitement, steer well clear of me. I want to go on being boring. I don't go to parties. Well, what are they for if you don't need to find a new lover? You drink and you listen and drink a bit more, and you take the next day to recover. Someone to stay at home with was all my desire, and now I've found a safe mooring. I've just one ambition in life. I aspire to go on, being boring. And there's a kind of delight in the fact that she quotes, ironically, all the kind of little humdrum events of an ordinary, boring day or life, and kind of makes something rather wonderful of the kind of matter-of-fact, boring, low-key existence that probably for most people most of the time is how it is. And if that seems at times boring and dry and empty and the such like, when people go through real traumas or sufferings, and goodness knows there are millions upon millions who suffer and have suffered, what they wouldn't give for just a kind of boring existence like that. Boring isn't really the right word. An existence where the ordinary commonplace events of life are actually wonderful. And think of how many people are denied that safe, sane, commonplace, so-called boring, but actually very rich and enriching existence. And this is what Wendy Cope writes by way of a little comment on this. She says, I hadn't written a poem for a while, and I thought to myself, I'm too boring to write poems these days. Then I sat down and wrote this. It goes down well with adult audiences, but I rarely read it in schools because I imagine that adolescents would find it shocking. The fact that life isn't all excitement, and that life can be pretty humdrum and ordinary much of the time, but that's how it is, and there's much to enjoy and celebrate in that commonplace existence. So there we are, 3 books tonight. Poem for the day 1, poem for the day 2, and those are both, I'm looking for the publishers, sorry I should have had that to hand. Nicholas Albery Foundation, don't know if that helps. And also the third one, Lifelines, New and Collected. This is the kind of anthology that brings the 3 other volumes together. It's the omnibus edition. But 3 wonderful books, and some religious, but the whole panorama of poetry, and enough for you to kind of sample poems and poets you may not have discovered, and maybe that will give you a new portal, a new way into discovering poems and poetry that you hadn't enjoyed before. Thanks for listening, and again, tune in next week and we'll look at another book or books for you to enjoy, read, or dip into. Thanks for listening. and God bless.